Cool. So yeah, we're going to talk about some testing at Wolt. I think the original thing that you saw in the meetup document or meetup site was something about master integration. There's going to be a lot of that, but I'm going to preface it with general testing things, some manual stuff, and we're going to get to the good stuff after. Who am I? Hi, I'm Valentin Lind, or the Finns call me Vallu. I'm a staff QA engineer, whatever that title means. Resident QA guy. I'm going to explain what QA at Wolt means in a bit. I've been at the company for 6-ish years, joined in 2019. We were a different company back then. I think I'm employee number 500 something. I don't know. But yeah, COVID was a ride. It's been fun. Previously, I've worked for Slush, for Kesko. Before that, Suomen Lähikauppa. All of them as a software developer. Found myself here, found myself enjoying testing, and I stayed for the thrill of it, for the ride and the technical challenges. That's about it. At the end, we'll have a Q&A thing. You can roast me then if you have any reasons to do so. Let's get going. Agenda. We're going to talk about what testing looks like at Wolt for the not average, but the default iOS engineer. A few of the approaches we'll discuss, both manual and automated. We'll talk about pre-release, during release. We'll be talking about our tooling that we've selected in the context of mobile and iOS. And then some of the custom stuff we've built on top. With a couple of examples. I can't show everything because NDA, blah, 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 but we have some good examples to show. Let's get going. So for the testing primer, we're going to talk about mostly manual. It's a mindset thing at the end of the day, but essentially, if you've read our blogs on the topic, Wolt follows a quality assistance model. Quality assistance means that we have a very limited amount of QA engineers. I think at the moment it's somewhere around 10, a bit over. We have the product organization, which is 800 plus people, somewhere around that. And the QA organization, until very recently, hasn't really grown in multiple years. Partly because of that, we've had to find ways how to support as many teams and groups and people as possible. I'm going to discuss what that means in practice in a bit. But essentially, testing looks very similar to how it would in general. You test meat and potato stuff. We try to test early and we try to test late. So this shifting left and right thing. So basically making sure that, you have planned for testing before you start implementation. So product people are aware and in the loop. Your designers are aware and in the loop. And testing instead of, plan, implement, test looks a bit more like this. So you do it a bit throughout the process. And then the right part means that you test at the end of the flow with, let's say, production type environments. So, for instance, you dog food. Depending on the app, dog fooding is easier said than done. But for instance, for the customer app that you saw and that you might use, it's very easy. We have test flight builds. We promote them a lot to our employees and to externals. I haven't used the App Store production build in years. I probably should take a look at it, at the the basic thing that we offer. But yeah, a lot of dog fooding is promoted. We also have some tooling to support dog fooding for apps that might be somewhere in the middle of a process, so that might have dependencies to a bunch of other stuff, require orders coming in, or other stuff coming in. So to make that happen, we have like automation to support that. We follow session-based techniques, which means that sometimes we might waste a lot of money. Sometimes we might save a lot of money. Testing in session-based techniques means that you use the hive mind, sit down and test together. So we follow usually these three things: testing parties, mob testing, and pair testing. Testing parties, if you're not familiar, they're a time box session where there's a facilitator, there's a scope, very clear scope and clear out of scope topics. Let's say you're working on a new feature. The Android, iOS, and web implementations are ready around the same time. So everybody sits down. iOS people test on Android. Android people test on iOS. Web people, we switch and we test together and communicate. If the team is spread out, which is the case nowadays a lot of the time for us, we do it over Zoom or in groups locally, if that's possible. So we have a Berlin office. There's a group in Berlin. We have a Helsinki office. There's a group in Helsinki, and then we, at the end, we track the progress in the end talk amongst each other. It's a very natural way of like finding out not the low-hanging fruits, but the really good bugs that might not come up without conversation. So, does this make sense? Is this translation correct? Is this user interaction as seamless as it could be? These types of UX/UI, like gold nuggets. Mob testing, pair testing, there's again a facilitator. There can be a situation where there's not, but usually somebody more senior in exploration, in exploring and doing exploratory testing sort of facilitates it. It can be either scripted or unscripted. The point there is to find a lot of bugs really fast. It assumes a level of proficiency in exploratory testing and thinking on the spot. And this is also the assistance part of things at Wolt, where we coach people into doing better exploratory testing. It's a skill as many others. It just requires you to sort of spin in one place and think about how a customer might break your stuff. We have variations of these with asynchronous approaches. So somebody makes a build. We have pre-made workflows for that, uploads them to their team, gives them some high-level testing specs, and other than that, says that go wild. And then people asynchronously go through it in some sort of time box inside the next 5 days, add comments, stuff gets fixed iteratively, and they might throw in new versions of the build into the same discussion or thread. The assistance model. So as I mentioned, we do a lot of testing. it might not be in the spot where it classically is. It might be very early on. It might be there more to support a software engineer in their planning and implementation. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What would happen if this response comes in instead of that? But still, a lot of testing is required. We might do test planning at the planning or RFC stage. So if we get a design, we also plan for the testing. Who would be testing? What sort of scope of testing would we do? Would it be manual or automated? Which frameworks would we use, etc. A lot of test automation work. I think we work sort of in a full stack approach where we support a group of a group of teams. People are embedded into, let's say, in a grouping of 3 to 5 teams. Those teams might work on the front end in native mobile with Flutter. We have a bunch of different backend technologies. Luckily, our testing stack is pretty like short and sweet. But we might work on backend system tests or our Playwright tests for the web, or Maestro tests that we're going to discuss, as well as do all of the stuff mentioned here. Coaching is super important. Presentations, talking to people. Nowadays, maybe a bit less because I think we're all out of time with some coaching related stuff, but it's still super important for the position. But that's about what our feature development looks like. A lot of collaboration and a lot of focus on the after the business logic is there, after the designs are implemented, after the painstaking motion is implemented. After that starts the sort of good stuff where we figure out whether this feature we're building is actually great or less great. Then we want to roll our stuff out. We have a dependency on the App Store, as do all of the apps on the App Store. So our release process cannot be fully continuous, but we can go towards it in our approach. I'm speaking from the context of our customer app because that's the domain I've mostly worked with. But we do have different approaches when it comes to releasing. The longer I've been here, the more it's starting to unify. But essentially, we run releasing either ad hoc, so release whenever, when you have enough stuff in main compared to the last release diff, or follow release trains. Release trains are, again, a time box thing. We freeze on a certain day, we test on a certain day or a few days, we give an AOK on a certain day, and then we start rollout and we follow a rollout strategy. In the customer app, we do 1-week releases. This has gone down from, it used to be ad hoc, then we did 3-week, 2-week, and now we're at 1. Nothing has crashed and burned yet. So let's see. But from a very personal perspective, we are getting a lot more stuff out, and we have less scope creep in our releases. So if you're considering at your job whether release trains are a horrible idea or a great one, I would say try it. Do a time box thing where, we give it 2 months, take notes, and then see how people feel about it. Either revert or continue. Our release trains have, I think, all of them, all the permutations of releasing at Wolt has some sort of release manager. That's a rotational role. That's, for instance, in the customer space, it's decided by the iOS group, and we have a automated thing that gives that, hey, for the next release, you're on duty. You have an assistant if you're sick or something. And then if you're out or something similar, you delegate to the next one. Teams, feature teams in the domain that they're working on. Let's say they're working on, again, on the customer iOS app. We have multiple teams working on that app. I think 22. Vague number, probably somewhere around that. So the teams own their own quality. Although they might have QA support, at the end of the day, it's the team in general that are responsible for, regressions or the good stuff, as I mentioned before. So teams are also running the regression tests for each release candidate. Sometimes we might assist them from the QA side, or sometimes another team might pick up 1 week's testing, but testing needs to be done either way. This is sort of recent, 1-year-old process that we followed. And it was scary to move into, and we're still like iterating over it, but looks pretty good. Oftentimes, when you're interested about quality, you get into a situation where you might be too interested and too what's the term? Too interested to fix all issues that come up. There's a limited amount of time in the world. There's limited resources in teams. Some of our teams have 1 iOS dev, 1 Android dev. Usually it's minimum 2, but stuff happens. And there's a lot of like communication overhead when it comes to, hey, I think this is important. Can I creep it into a release? Hey, I'm getting complaints from customers about this, or my boss is yelling at me, blah, blah, blah. We follow this defect matrix thing that clearly defines what your issue priority is. These are defined as a group, sort of the types of things. There might be, authentication related stuff, crashes, compliance, stuff not working at all, UI issues. For us, UI is considered pretty up there. Functioning with a workaround, those are the main ones. Then there's telemetry and stuff like that at the bottom. But in some cases, a telemetry issue might actually be a compliance thing, depending on the situation. So we set like a priority indicator for your issue type. We use telemetry data to gather information about how many users actually hit this feature. So we use that as our shining light. Telemetry is sent to our analytics server or analytics service called Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper throws it to Kafka. Kafka spits it out to a service called Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis puts it to Snowflake. And then we use Mixpanel BI system to watch dashboards. So based on the telemetry data, we can say, let's say your feature is, you have a static UI issue in some button on your feature. The feature is out in one market. We operate in, what was it, 27, 28 countries. So it's been released to one country. The country is super small. User amounts are somewhere around 0.5% within the last 30 days. Your supercritical issue wasn't supercritical in the end, so it's P2. There are definitely considerations of we just launched this market, we want to succeed. It's not a good look, but generally this makes it easier for us to say fix, don't fix. Telemetry means like data about interactions, about you seeing views, data. The question was, what is telemetry? Yes. What? The question was, what do... So I mentioned that we have like a pipeline with two custom services in the middle, but we throw it through Kafka to Snowflake. Through our like app interactions. What do we use for actually like tracking? Yep. Yeah, usually custom is the answer. Oh yeah. Yeah, but the business implication wiggle room is important because those situations always come, and we are flexible enough to assist if something super important comes up. You see some examples of issue type and what the description actually is. Examples. We have very in-depth examples given out for very complicated cases because things are often more complicated than a list or a matrix. But we try to follow this. It's been pretty good in ironing out some of the communication issues that we've previously had. I have a thing there called release with conviction, but we've really focused on this. We have an internal thing called Wolt grade. We really want like good feeling, nice looking features that are thoroughly thought out when we push them out. So UI UX excellence, everything should be feature flagged so that if something goes wrong, we can disable the feature. So that also means that everything should be backward compatible. There shouldn't be any scope creep in your feature. Sometimes that's not possible, but that's what we're aiming for. A lot of experimentation, trying, A/B testing, etc. And then controlled rollouts. This is a diagram of our release. You can see it later if you want. We're gonna share this document, but I'm not sure if you see from here. Start, workflows and comms, teams test in parallel. A problem is found. Is it P0, P1? If yes, fix, build, test, nothing blocking. Then all teams are done. Then we go to scheduling a release. Release manager monitors Crashlytics. We use Firebase Crashlytics to monitor the incoming crashes. And then we roll out for some days and then manually release to 100 when we're comfortable. That's it in short. We have a lot of caveats and edge cases to this. What happens if the App Store doesn't review your stuff in time? What happens if we need to fix? We can't. We need to shift releases back and forward if those situations come. But If everything goes fine, this is the thing. Then we get into our test automation. So if you're not familiar, we use Maestro. Maestro is an end-to-end testing framework, very similar to under the hood to any other black box end-to-end testing framework with a small twist. We're going to talk about twist soon. It's open source, maintained by this company, Maestro Dev. There's some good pros in there. Because of the syntax, which you're going to see soon, implementing stuff is pretty quick. It offers some supportive tooling that also help in implementing stuff faster. It has some built-in fault tolerance, so you rarely have to set up explicit waits. It waits for you. You can fiddle around with the limits of how long it waits, but you can also set them explicitly if your test needs it. The con that I would want to raise is that it is very sparse in guidelines. You can do whatever you want with it, but it does have some opinionation in how you should do the thing you're trying to achieve. This is a Maestro. This is a Maestro test. I'm not sure if you can see it. There we go. So, it's YAML, our favorite thing. This is a test with declarations of different tags, app IDs, a bunch of stuff goes on the top of this multi-doc YAML, and after this line, your test. Maestro offers a bunch of commands, very similar to any other framework, but it does have some very nice stuff where you can open link, provide a deep link of some sort, whatever the format is, or a URL or a whatever other link, and it just works, which is pretty nice for traversing. You can find available commands here. Very normal stuff. You can swipe, you can tap, you can double tap, you can enter text, assert, and then you can run flows. A flow in Maestro language is any file that you want to run, any set of commands that you want to run. It's mostly like an abstraction for a list of commands. So that is what we consider to be a flow. It can be embedded into your native project. It can be in a separate repo. All you need is the Maestro CLI, and you can run tests. Back to this. It has a sort of unique selector pattern in the way that you don't really keep any selector contents in memory. You instead interact with them and forget them. We're going to show some examples of this soon, but just keep that in mind. Maestro mostly is run on simulators and emulators. Technically, they do support real devices for Android, but when the maintainers spit stuff like this out, I wouldn't trust whether that's true or not. Android does run on real devices. iOS implementation hasn't been considered at this point. It is open source, so technically people can add PRs, but getting those approved might be a different thing. CI/CD is important. You want to run your automated tests automatically. Some vendors have specialized in this. Maestro offers their own proprietary CI thing. Maestro Cloud runs on AWS instances. I'm assuming in AWS, but instances in the States only. You know, they have clear SLAs. They're SOC 2 compliant. If you're a big company, that's important for you. They have a bunch of integration options to, you know, your GitHub Actions or Bitrise, or they have a ton of them. But they cost more than rolling up your own or using this device cloud thing. British company, runs in Europe, a lot of advanced device controls, faster based on our experiments. And because it's a smaller company, you can get stuff through their request pipeline pretty easily at the moment. Or you can implement your own. At Wolt, we use Device Cloud as well as our own implementation. Depending on the use case, we might have some, like, at some point, if something is down, we instead defer to the other. But at the moment, that's the situation. Some tips. We've used this for a year now. We've played around with it in multiple projects. I think this is the de facto framework for Wolt at this point. But because Maestro, all it is a CLI tool and questions, you have to be the person that answers those questions. So create a stable structure. Maestro considers this a suite. These are tests by default. If you structure your setup unclearly, it's going to be unclear. So use some sort of business domain mapping, use some high-level component mapping, something that makes sense, and stick to it. Have clear naming patterns. Make it as understandable as possible, because from the framework's point of view, it doesn't really matter what you name stuff and how you structure it. Keep stuff dry. Don't repeat yourself. Flows are really good for this. So you can use steps, you know, have a bunch of step definitions or interaction definitions in your whatever path you've created, and reuse them in your tests. Have a clear understanding of what the input is and what the output is. Utilize the built-in commands. There's a lot of them. Don't, you know, reinvent the wheel. Some selector strategies to use. So Maestro evaluates all selectors to regex, from regex to a string. It takes in your stuff. If it looks like a string, it's a string, but you can also do something like, I want to tap on continue or go forward. This is a selector that works. So it tries to tap on continue. If that's not available, taps on go forward. And you can use as many of these as you want. However, it's up to you how you want to actually structure your thing. Here, it asserts that stuff starting with please choose the country is available. You can use this Maestro Studio that comes with the tool to interact with your app. It opens a browser window. You can check for locators. If you have an accessibility ID for your component, you can see it. You know, you can interact with it. It updates, does stuff. Sometimes it takes a bit of time, but, you know, and then you can progress. You can copy over these things. to your test. You can export them, you can replay them, all that stuff. And you can also experiment with your setup. Let me close this. Well, so another option is the page object model. Maestro defines this. Maestro comes shipped with a JavaScript interop. You can write JavaScript that runs in the test runtime. With the JavaScript, you can define some sort of object structure where you define your locators and then you use them something like this in your tests. You know, you can do this if you want. We have complex cases. You know, you want to verify that this thing that has this text is sponsored and doesn't cost anything to deliver is visible. You can do something like this. So you can chain these locators together. You can chain them by descendants or siblings or stuff like this. Maestro comes shipped with a hierarchy inspector. So it just spits out the hierarchy. So it's pretty easy to define that. At the end of the day, if you have good accessibility identifiers for your app, you don't really need to do any of this. One thing to note, I wouldn't suggest adding any asserts or taps on anything that's moving and disappearing. So if you have a toast of some sort that disappears after, let's say, 4 seconds or 5 seconds, I wouldn't assert that. It might be flaky. Some of the custom stuff we've implemented. So we have a custom CLI that has Maestro embedded and a bunch of other integrations embedded. We do a lot of things, but I'll go through a couple of examples. We pass launch arguments to our app, to the customer app, for instance. We have a Maestro testing service implementation in the app. It reads stuff from user defaults that we pass stuff to by this launch app command. So here's an example with a very simple user class or struct. We want to pass, let's say we've created the user, we get the response for that user and we want to log in with that user without having to manually like tap on stuff. Because the response is a JSON object, Swift or the API responsible for this has some limitation, type limitations. It takes in strings, arrays, data, stuff, but not object blobs, JSON, whatever. So we instead have to stringify it. We have to encode it, and then on the app side, decode it. There's a nice blog post about this. But yeah, we put it into XML and then decode it on the app side. But from the Maestro side, when you actually want to send something over, it's just like launch app arguments user. This is the response, and this is what is actually passed to user defaults. And this is the JavaScript that makes the request to some endpoint and, you know, stringifies it and puts it into XML brackets. We have test actors. You might need them if you depend on some prerequisite to be true in your end-to-end test. So, you know, you want the user to be there. You want orders to be in. You want some data to be existing within your test runtime. So we offer that with the JavaScript thing that Maestro offers. What we offer is customer-related stuff, so you can create, edit, delete them. You can create, edit, delete orders. You can interact with emails and SMSs, stuff like this. We have a bunch of them in the pipeline, and we have a separate service for this that we're slowly transferring our stuff to. I suggest this to keep the amount of taps and amount of interactions as low as possible. Because live data is live, your development environment might be a bit questionable. So if that's the case, take out as many questions from the equation as possible. Or unit test. Maybe. Then telemetry was mentioned previously. So we have an implementation for network mocking. We use Mitten proxy as the man-in-the-middle service. Basically, we added a custom CLI command. We defined basic traffic interception rules. We use Python for that. And then we have shippable handling of proxy routing asserts. What I mean by that is we set certificates to the simulator, and we have to set proxy routing to your OS, and then we disable it after the test run. This was Nick's hard work plus I think some AI assistance, but it works pretty nice. And the actual evaluation of that telemetry data and the incoming stuff is done via JavaScript. What else? Yeah, that's about it. We have a bunch of other stuff. Would love to show you a bunch of it, but I think we're running a bit out of time. So I'm gonna go to the Q&A section. If you have any questions, please ask.
Let's use the mic because of the recording. Hi, thank you for the talk. 2 questions. First one is, in Wolt, how much do you use accessibility identifiers versus string-based locators?
We generate accessibility IDs. We have a method in, I don't remember the module, but we sort of auto-generate them based on the component names. So they should be pretty much always available if you've remembered to generate accessibility identifiers in your setup.
Okay.
Technically, they should be available. In some cases, because we have the same setup for Android and iOS, in some cases it's easier to just defer to string or some regex thing. But it's up to the team and up to their willingness to maintain their tests.
Okay. And the second question is the Maestro testing service protocol. How does that work exactly? Is that some code running in the app that the JavaScript runtime is calling into somehow? Or
it's just we initialize it on app startup, and it listens to incoming. I'm just thinking mostly of Android and intents, but it's listening to. Let me check. So it's listening to process info arguments. If it contains UI tests, then it stores stuff in user defaults.
Okay. So it's like a one-off initial setup for the launch.
Pretty much, yeah. We run all of our tests in parallel in CI, so it's done on every test run. But locally, it's done per test run, and that might have, you might have a lot of tests in your test run. Maestro does offer sharding locally as well. You can define the amount of shards you want and the sharding strategy. but we haven't used that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I see some nods and anti-nods. Great.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you.